All right. Good morning, everyone. I think we're starting to let people in. My guest today is Judge Anna Escobar, General Sessions Division Court Judge, Division 3. Welcome, Judge. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much, Jim, for having me today.
Sure thing. So we let people on for the first 2 or 3 minutes. So I usually ask some non-relevant questions. So obviously you're at the Frisk Museum right now. What is that painting behind you? And did you do that?
Well, actually, my mother, my mother did it, and it's her interpretation of a Van Gogh. Her interpretation.
Her interpretation of a Van Gogh, is that what it is?
Yes,
it's
sir.
Very good.
Yes.
How long has it been up there?
Let's see, probably 8 years.
8 years?
Mm-hmm.
And is your mother still alive?
Yes, she is. She is. But
okay, good. And does she still paint?
She unfortunately has arthritis, so she's had to stop. So I'm lucky to have these treasures.
Well, I am very impressed. I am very impressed with the painting. It's very good. And you have more of her artwork around your house?
I do.
Okay. And it's actually very, very good.
Well, thank you, Jim.
Did she used to paint a lot?
She did. She was in classes and was really devoted to it.
Okay. Well, it looks like you're in the Frisk. It's very nice. And you also dressed up for this.
I did.
And then you made the rest of us look bad. So there.
I was going to be with the vice mayor of Nashville, Jim.
Yeah, whatever. That really doesn't impress many people. But we are so glad you're here. It's a really interesting topic. I guess we're probably pretty much ready to start. We usually, again, we give people a couple of minutes, but we'll start because I'm intrigued by the topic and what you're doing about it. I think it's really, really important. So Judge Anna Escobar, General Sessions Division Court 3. We have, I know Councilmember John Rutherford is on the call. We'll probably get some other elected officials on as we go. So the first question, Judge, that we always ask is, tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you come from a family of, at least your mother is an artist, but where are you from? How did you get to be a judge? Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I was born in Colombia, South America, and my family's from there, and most of my family's still there. But when I was 6 months old, my father went to do his residency in Providence, Rhode Island. We were there for about 2 years, and then we came to Nashville for him to finish up his residency at Vanderbilt. So we have, except for 2 years when we went to Colorado, we have been in Nashville for about 44 years. So what's interesting for me is to see how Nashville has grown, especially with the immigrant population. When I was growing up, I was definitely one of the few people who spoke Spanish, who was Hispanic in my grade school and my high school. There was a handful of families that knew each other, and they became my extended family. So it has just been wonderful to watch Nashville grow. I would have never dreamed that we would have Plaza Mariachi and Conexión Americas. And last year we started the Nashville Hispanic Bar Association, and I'm proud to say that there are about 30 members. Because in 1995, when I started practicing law, I could count the number of Spanish speakers. So I went to St. Henry's, St. Cecilia, Vanderbilt. I went all the way up West End for college. And then I went to George Washington for law school. And when I was at GW, there was a bulletin board back when there were bulletin boards. And there was a flyer for the Nashville Public Defender's Office there. So Carl Dean was looking for Spanish speakers to come to the Public Defender's Office. So I thought, oh my gosh, that's heaven sent, right? So I started interning there, and I really fell in love with criminal law, and I practiced it for the majority of my career. I was a public defender, a DA twice, in private practice. For a while there, I was Metro clerk. And I was deputy director of the administrative office of the courts. And then in 2018, Judge Dalton went up to the criminal court, And this opened up a domestic violence slot. And so I ran for it and won. And I'm one of 3 judges that work with domestic violence cases. And in 2019, I was very fortunate to be able to preside over Cherished Hearts, which is the Human Trafficking Survivors Court. It's a treatment court, and I can go into that when you want me to.
Okay. Well, so your dad's a doctor.
Yes, sir.
And Providence. So Brown University. Was that where he was? Where did he go?
He went to St. Joseph Hospital.
Okay.
So, and I don't know honestly too much about it since I was 2, around there, to the age of 2. Yeah, so Vanderbilt, I went to Vanderbilt. My mother actually is a cytologist. People who look at cells, I've always had to explain that, not a psychologist. And she's retired. My dad's retired, and they live in Brentwood.
A cytologist.
Yes.
And what is a cytologist? Is the study of styes? What, or size? What is the cytologist?
Cells. So when you go get a biopsy, they look at your slide and they determine whether or not you have cancer.
That is such an interesting thing. How did she decide that's what she wanted? Did she have to go to med school to do that?
Not a full program in med school, but she did finish up her studies at Vanderbilt and did work until my brother was born.
Okay. All right. That's so interesting. I'd like to have her on the show. Actually, if she's in the house right now, if she could just move out of the way. I actually have some questions for her.
Oh, goodness.
Not only about her painting, but her study of cells. I think that's interesting. The reason I ask about Providence is that most of my family is from Providence.
Oh, no way. I had no idea.
They all lived in that area, and I have a lot of cousins that still live around Providence in Warwick, Rhode Island. So I was interested. So you went to Vanderbilt, and then you went to GW.
Yes.
And did you like law school?
Law school is, you know what, I admire the way Belmont teaches law school now, because the law school, the traditional way of teaching law school is very competitive, there are a lot of mind games. And when you get out of it, you honestly don't know how to practice law. And I love the fact that Belmont is teaching their students how the practical parts of law and how to actually practice it. And I'm sure you've seen that their bar passage rate is like through the roof. They're very impressive.
Yeah, I went to Vanderbilt Law School.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and I don't remember. I'm not sure. I didn't like it all that much either.
Yeah.
And when I got out, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and obviously, I still don't. That's why I don't practice anymore. I did practice for a while, but still don't really know what I was doing.
So it's all head games, it's all, who's studying the most, what did you study, so it's really not very practical.
It was so it was very difficult, and I still have nightmares about it. Still remember, like nightmares about not preparing or being called on in class or whatever. But anyway, it's an interesting thing. So you did all kinds of different things. Obviously, you worked in the DA's office twice, public defender's office, and then you were in private practice, and then you were the clerk for the council for a while. And so tell us, being a general sessions judge, and there's a number of them, are you on the basic rotation? Do you have lots of different things that come through your court? Or because of kind of some of the unique stuff you do, are you kind of on a special rotation? How does that work?
So there are 11 general sessions judges, and Judge Gail Robinson and Allegra Walker and I are part of the domestic violence team. So we rotate through domestic violence 8 months out of the year. So for 4 months, we do domestic violence criminal cases that are on bond. For 4 months, we do domestic violence cases where people are in jail. And then for 4 months, we do the regular rotation. And domestic violence cases can be burglaries, can be vandalism, it can be the assaults that you typically think of, but it can involve a lot of different things as long as it's with a family member or a intimate partner or a roommate. So it can be anything.
Okay, and did you say that 4 months of the year you're on the general rotation?
Correct.
And that's with all the other judges.
Yes. Yeah.
So for people who don't understand general sessions court, the general rotation means that you can get all kinds of different things coming
Mhm.
in. And it could be everything from, do you do traffic court as well?
Traffic
Yeah.
tickets, emergency committals for MTMHI, just civil cases, other kinds of crime. So every week you change what you do.
Okay. So pre-pandemic, because if you've never been to general sessions court, you probably should go.
Yes.
But pre-pandemic, not during the pandemic, um, in a general rotation, just a regular civil docket, how many cases would you hear, like in there, a morning docket and an afternoon docket?
Yes.
Because it's just packed sometimes. So how many people would you normally deal with in a like a morning?
So there are people and then there are cases. So one person can have 5 cases, right? So you can go through maybe 25 to 30 people plus all their cases. And so remember, with each case, there are witnesses, there's defense lawyers, prosecutors, so a lot of people come through the doors, people there for support. So we have a lot of people that come to the AA Birch building.
It's amazing. I mean, I hadn't been there in a while, but I just remember how many people come through that system. And uh, I applaud all the judges for being able to handle that. So let's talk about, the focus of today was on this human trafficking court. Um, Tell us how that sort of got started, and exactly how you kind of, what the court is for, and kind of what you're seeing with the court.
Okay. Well, first of all, the Cherished Hearts Court is a treatment court. So I'm sure you've heard of the mental health court, the veterans court, the recovery court. So the idea with a treatment court is that it's a much more informal relationship with the person that's in the court. There's a team of people who can advise the person, monitor the person, and provide services for the person in the court. There are weekly check-ins. And so the judge actually gets to know everyone in the court. In our particular court, it's interesting. What we look for is people who have been trafficked. And so what does that mean? That means people who have had sexual relations or been forced to have sex for the benefit of a third party. And so many times that's achieved through force. They say force, fraud, or coercion. So the fraud part comes in where you're promised, a better life, a relationship, a good place to live. And so those promises are broken. And the coercion can be that trafficker can get you addicted to drugs, threaten to harm you. And more you hear of young people being blackmailed by photos that are intimate. So these survivors enter into these relationships, and then what we see is that they start committing crimes for the trafficker. So most of our participants actually are not charged with prostitution. They're charged with car theft and fraud and things that, drug possession, things that the trafficker has caused them to get into for the trafficker. So we really rely on defense attorneys, probation officers, prosecutors and other judges to refer these cases to us. Sadly, with COVID, we had to take a break from taking people. But the court was started about 3 years ago with Casey Moreland. And it was a dream of 2 DAs, Tammy Mead and Deb Smith. And they got together with Judge Moreland. They applied for a grant, and it was born. And so since then, there have been 4 judges who have presided over it, and 2 different executive directors. So I was very lucky to be able to preside over it, because I have had a very big interest in human trafficking, and it's so complex, and it's kind of related to domestic violence. So the program, I'm very grateful and pleased to thank you, Vice Mayor Schulman, because the council did pass a grant on Tuesday I was there with you on Tuesday, which will allow us to keep doing that work. And so I'm very, very grateful to the council and to everyone who helped us get that grant.
So go back and let's talk about how people are kind of diverted into your court. And what's the right name for the court? Is there a name for it?
It's called Cherished Hearts, but we refer to it as Human Trafficking Survivors, so court, but
Okay.
it's
All right.
Cherished.
So people are not, so a case comes through, the DA see it or the public defender sees it, and or somebody sees it and says, this looks like a situation. And maybe the first question should be difference between prostitution and human trafficking. Is there a difference in this?
Absolutely. So prostitution, first of all, is when you are able to you receive the benefits of your sexual act. I don't monetary benefits or whatever it is you're exchanging. As I said, with human trafficking, there's a third party that benefits, not the person who's performing the act. And of course, there are two types of human trafficking. There's labor trafficking and sex trafficking. We have not had any labor cases, so we really haven't been geared toward labor. But in the sex trafficking, that TBI is saying that human trafficking is the second fastest growing industry in Tennessee behind drugs. And what they say is, with drugs, you have to worry about getting them into the country, storing them, selling them. But with a person, you can sell that person over and over and over again. And the possession of that person isn't in itself illegal. So it's less dangerous for the trafficker. So prostitution is a B misdemeanor. Patronizing prostitution, in other words, buying those services, is an A misdemeanor. But human trafficking, if you are a trafficker, is a B felony. And one thing I'd love to tell you is that Nashville has been very proactive about trying to decriminalize prostitution. There's a wonderful program through the DA's office and the Office of Family Safety called Grace Empowered. So if you are charged with prostitution, you go to a day-long class on a Friday. You are exposed to different nonprofit agencies. You take a test with the Lentz health department to make sure that you don't have any STDs. You're given all kinds of information about in slavery and Magdalene and all these wonderful programs, so that if you do want to leave the life, you have those resources. If you attend that program, then the prostitution charge is dismissed. And also the legislature decriminalized prostitution for juveniles. So that crime does not exist with juveniles anymore. So honestly, Jim, I forgot what I was saying.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, so that's why I'm here, to confuse you and to get you back on track. So we're talking about prostitution and human trafficking, but part of it was, okay, so how do people get into your court? If it's the second fastest growing criminal activity, I guess, in Tennessee, it's not like, I mean, unless somebody figures out there's a human trafficking operation, I assume it's coming through different channels and different criminal elements. So how does it get into your court? How does a case identified to get into your court so that people can get some help?
So, so let's say a police officer encounters somebody who they believe is being trafficked. They can actually refer those people to Magdalene, to End Slavery, and then they can receive services. We at Cherished Hearts will help someone who's already in the system with a criminal case. So you do need to have a criminal case to get our services. We rely on defense attorneys, judges, probation officers to really flag it. And that's why we are really committed to trying to educate all our partners so that they can see the red flags. It's interesting because once you know the red flags, you start noticing that something's not quite right. And I'd love to give you the red flags if you'd like me to.
And that and that's the question. The question is going to be, so is it the same? The police are looking, the system is looking. Does everybody, are the red flags the same? If a police officer stops somebody, are they looking for the same things that you all are looking for? Red
Absolutely.
flag the same. Okay, so what are the red flags?
Okay. So when you're talking to the person, they don't even know where they live or where they've been, and they can't give you an address, and they have a very scripted and inconsistent history of who they are. Sometimes they're unwilling to answer questions. They don't give you a direct eye contact, or there's somebody with them that is watching them speak. And so the person will look to the person that they're with and almost like asking for permission to speak, or the person that's with them will dominate the conversation. The person may be very nervous, very fearful. Like I said, they can't give you the current dates, times, where they've been. They don't possess any ID documents, driver's license, passports. They're not in control of their money. A lot of them have tattoos. Some of them, we've had some participants that have neck tattoos with things like daddy or property of, and there are all kinds of symbols that you can look for with him on the tattoos. They sometimes they wear inappropriate clothing for the weather that they're that's happening.
Mhm.
They let's see, some of those tattoos can be a crown tattoo, a rose, the name of a man. Sometimes if you see a minor at a hotel during school hours, somebody being demeaned, they're sleep deprived, they're gaslighted, that kind of thing. So it's one of those things that I keep saying, Jim, if you see something, say something, because we as citizens don't walk around thinking, people are being human trafficked, but there is a sixth sense, a gut that tells you there's something wrong. And so if you do see something that you think is just strange, there is the hotline that's run by the TBI, and that number is 1-855-55-TNHTH. And they say the important thing is not to approach the person because you may put yourself or that person in danger, but report it to get as much detail and description that you can. So we are trying to educate all our partners to look for these cases, and it's interesting. I know I'm not. When you start looking at these warrants, you kind of get a sixth sense of like, this is strange. Why is this person doing this? Why is this other person always with this person when they get arrested? So our partners will flag them. Our director will screen the person to see if they want to come. Our program is voluntary. It's a 2-year commitment. So you need to want to do this. And it consists of 5 phases. So if the person is willing to do it, if they've go through the screening process and it does turn out that they were trafficked, then we are more than happy to take them. And we ask the judge that currently has the case to allow us to supervise the person under probation.
All right. So 2 things. One is I think I hear a cat in the background.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Clarify that.
So it was either, Jim, that you see the cat or you heard the cat.
I heard the cat. I didn't see the cat, but I did hear the cat. But the second thing is, so there were a number of questions over the week about what can normal citizens like me do. What are we looking for? So you just kind of went over the red flags. The second thing was, what can we do? Typically, it's going to be a really broad question. So it seems to be happening everywhere, and it's right in front of us, and we may not even be paying attention to it. So you kind of gave us the red flags, and you gave us the information. We just put the phone number up on the chat box. So If you see something, you're supposed to make the phone call.
Mhm.
But typically, is it typically um, a younger female with an older adult? Is it could it be an older? It's not. Does it fit into a pattern, or could it be an older woman with a younger guy? I mean, is there any consistency to what we're seeing and what we may be looking for?
So, I think the biggest, we were talking about this before, Jim, that when I first started getting interested in this, I thought of it as something that happened in Thailand or somewhere in another foreign country, but it's
Right.
actually happening in our backyard. And sadly, some of it is family members, you know, who are doing this to children in order to get drugs or whatever it is that they need. But anyway, um, so it is very small, the percentages of people who are just walking down the street. It's very small, the percentages of those people who get kidnapped, thrown into a white van, and then they disappear. What our biggest problem, Jim, is a cell phone. And so these young children or young people, young women, may have broken homes, may not be getting along with their parents, may have low self-esteem, may not have any friends. So they get on, TikTok, Snapchat, all those different things. And then there are these predators who are watching for language of some child posting, I hate my mom, or I'm down, I'm depressed. So they friend these children. And then the children think that they are in a relationship with this person. And sometimes these people completely lie about who they are. And then, they ask the children to meet them. And then all of a sudden, your child disappears. Another situation could be, advertising for modeling. I don't know if you've noticed, I don't know if you're a big social media guy, Jim, but a lot
I
of
try to
these
I try to stay away from social media.
a lot of these young women, you can tell, are trying to become models, and so they'll post things on TikToks and different applications or platforms, trying to model, and so people will prey on that and say, "Well, I've got a modeling gig for you," and so there are different types of predators. There's the predator who wants you to believe that they're going to be your boyfriend, your savior, they're going to get you out of your bad situation, and give you support and buy you things. And then there's the one who beats you up, and once you submit to them and that you think that's your boyfriend, then they start beating you up, and then you're too scared to live. And then to leave, I'm sorry. And then there's the people who take, like I said, those intimate pictures, or um, threaten you with telling your parents that and your friends that, that they exposing those pictures and telling your family and friends that you have done things that probably weren't appropriate. So there are different ways for these predators to kind of take advantage of these children or young people or people who are depressed or just not feeling adequate. And so there's a whole, that's the intersection of domestic violence and human trafficking. And so you've heard of the power and control wheel for domestic violence. There is a power and control wheel for human trafficking. There's the recruitment phase, the grooming, then the breaking of that person, calling them ugly, nobody else is going to love you. And then, there's what they call maintenance, where once you've broken that person, you make them start turning tricks, or collecting or seeing Johns is what
Yeah.
they're called. And so then these poor girls and boys need to disassociate themselves from this horrible thing that's happening to them, and then they get addicted to drugs, and so then they kind of accept their fate. And then there's all this trauma bonding with the person that you think you're in love with. So it's just a very complex situation. So our program tries to tackle all these things that have happened to that person during that power and control relationship, The first thing we try to tackle is getting the person into recovery. So
Okay,
they get,
let me stop for you a
okay.
second, because go back, and I think this is a relevant question as you go through the program. Um, First of all, it's very scary, and it's also very depressing, because I was going like, well, how do you teach kids how to be careful with this? And you don't want to, you want to teach children to be wary and so forth, but you also want them to enjoy the
Right.
life that they've been born into. So you don't want to, immediately in third grade start terrifying them. And we'll go back to that in a second, because I'm trying to figure out the education piece. But before you get into how the steps to try to deal with it, you've got these individuals that are um, probably terrified of the person that is their keeper.
Mhm.
How do you get them to be willing to go into their program? If that, how do you break that? How do you break that fearful cycle and say, we'll help you. We want you into the program. And then how do you get that? And then what do you do to try to keep them in the program?
So you are absolutely right. It is, and you got to remember before we talk about this, a lot of people who are survivors have also been victims of child abuse, child molestation in their youth. So
Right.
there's so much trauma already there. So juvenile court has a wonderful program through Epic Girl. I don't know if you've heard of them. Stasia runs that. And so when juvenile court sees a child that perhaps is being trafficked, they will send Epic Girl to speak with them to try to educate them, because so many, it's interesting, Jim, because so many of the people that we talk to, if you say, hey, are you a victim of human trafficking, they would say no. But so if you, when you break it down and ask specific questions, then they start realizing, well, maybe I was. So to answer your question, at the juvenile level, they really try to start educating these kids about what's happening to them, trying to open their eyes, trying, if they want to get out of the life, they are there for them. And another thing I'd like to point out is with the LGBTQ community, when children sometimes are rejected by their families for coming out, they are also very vulnerable and maybe taken advantage of. So then you get to the adult system where I am. And I'll be frank, these poor ladies have gone through a lot before they get to me. They have multiple children, they've lost custody, they have charges in different places in Tennessee, and they just are frankly tired. So by the time they get to me, unfortunately, they've hit a wall. And we expect them, frankly, that the first time that we accept them into the program, many of them run. And then they eventually come back to us when they're ready. And we have to accept that that's part of their journey to really deconstruct all the craziness that was indoctrinated into them, the addiction issues. A lot of these participants have mental health issues. So we do work with the mental health co-op to get them medications. We work with the sexual assault center to get them therapy specifically for trauma. So there is so much going on there. And sometimes for some of our participants, the light bulb is that they want their kids back. And so, but unfortunately, Jim, some of these young people who are 21, 22 have experienced more in their life, in their short lives than any of us will ever see or experience.
Yeah.
And honestly, Jim, I feel, the reason I say I feel so fortunate is because I get to witness how hard they try, how hard overcoming addiction is, how hard it is to heal a broken heart, how hard it is um, to really get your self-esteem back. And these primarily ladies every week are in that journey, and they're strong. They're strong. They are very strong. And so it's humbling. And even though they may stumble, you've got to admire that they're getting back on their feet and trying to choose something else for them and their children.
So I'm going to ask you, not that you can,
Mhm.
I mean, how many people are coming through the program? I mean, are you seeing the numbers? Obviously, we do. It's weird with the pandemic and so forth, but the number of people that you're seeing through this growing.
Well, so the average is 15, and there it's kind of like a pipeline. So we're about to graduate some in August. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we have not very many kind of in the middle part, and then we have a lot of new participants. So it's more of a pipeline situation. Now with this new grant, I hope to grow it to at least 20. And I do think there is a benefit in keeping it small, so that the participants really get the attention and the expertise of all the team members. And if I could mention that we have people from TBI, mental health mental health cooperative, mental health co-op on our team, the Family Safety Center, the Sexual Assault Center, Magdalene and Slavery, um, and then the DA's office and the public defender's office are all part of this team. And so we discuss the participants before we go into court every Tuesday, and we just, see how we can support them, what they need for the week, how their counseling's going, how their mental health is doing, whether they've gotten jobs, trying to help them with getting their license, getting, some of these ladies have walked away from their prior life, so they have nothing. And luckily, Jim, we are so blessed in this city because we have End Slavery and Magdalene and so many other programs. I'm sure you saw that the governor just gave End Slavery like $3.5 million to build a campus. So that's just going to be so beneficial to all of us.
How do those groups play into? I guess I'm interested. So it's a 2-year program,
Yes. Yes.
right? And do the individuals who are a part of the program have to come in every Tuesday?
So there are 5 phases, and the first phase, a couple of phases, you do come every week, and then once you've passed some of the phases, you come every other week, and then toward the end of the program, you're coming just once a month. Because by the end of the program, you're supposed to have gotten a job, gotten independent living, so you're a lot busier, right? And so we gradually don't see them as much, but they are still expected to keep their appointments with the mental health co-op, with their therapy, and we encourage them to keep up their recovery work. And so they're very busy, very busy.
And do they get? Is it paid for through the program? Is it paid for through like a 10-care program? How does it get? How does it work that way?
So with the recovery, the addiction treatment, we do rely on, some of them have insurance. We do rely on spot grants to
Mhm.
get them through. And then once you're done with that, we need to figure out the intensive outpatient part of it. And many of those inpatient providers have an outpatient portion to it. So we're able to do that. And then the ladies can go to either End Slavery or Magdalene, they do provide housing for them, and so the ladies are actually experiencing kind of a dual situation where they're going through cherished hearts, but they're also going through the Magdalene and End Slavery program. So it is a lot of support
Yeah.
for them.
Is it? And we're talking about ladies again. Go back. Or do you see gentlemen coming through? I mean, it,
Well,
it sounds like it's more women than men, but do you
yes.
see both?
We had a trans woman. Unfortunately, she was not able to complete the program. Um, I am sure there are men out there, but they just have not been found. And we would love to have anyone and everyone, it doesn't matter who they are. Um, we would welcome them into the program.
All right, so let's go to, there were a couple of questions about how do you stop it to begin with? What efforts are being done to stop all of this at the beginning? There was a question about Emperor of the Day. You
Right.
wave your magic wand. What are the 2 or 3 things that if you could do to deal with this, what would you do? And there's also a question came through the chat box about reporting. So let's kind of tie it all together. um, how do we deal with this better? How do we stop this?
Yeah. So sadly, Jim, I think we have to start at the very, 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 very beginning. Having been in criminal law for 25 years, it seems like when children are victimized at an early age, or if they are witnessing domestic violence, that, the whole ACEs theory really comes into play, and that makes those children more vulnerable for things later on. So, man, if we could stop child sex abuse, child physical abuse, that'd be one great thing. And somehow concentrating on our children, building their self-esteem, building their feeling loved. I know that sounds so hippy dippy, but like so many of this are especially young women who have some kind of low self-esteem for some reason. And I think we as parents have got to really figure out all these apps and figure out what our kids are listening to and who they're talking to. I have a 14-year-old son, and frankly, I don't really understand all of it. But luckily, I have friends in law enforcement who are constantly teaching me this app, that app. But we really, as parents, need to educate ourselves, because while I'm sitting here down here with you, I'm sure my son is upstairs talking to God knows who on his computer. So we have no idea who we're letting into our homes. Um, and it's not that every single case happens that way. But and then there's the whole mental health component, where people are not being treated with their mental health issues, and sometimes that causes them not to be able to evaluate situations correctly or wisely. So if we could help people get the mental health treatment that they need early on. So I'm still emperor of the day, right? And
Right,
so,
right. You
and
still
then,
got the magic wand. That's fine.
yes, and then there's drug addiction. Jim, I was talking to a police officer 2 weeks ago, and he told me that since January, there have been 200 overdoses. And I'm telling you, that is the biggest secret kept in Nashville. I wish you would do a show on that, because Metro has had to devote like 4 or 6 officers just to track these overdoses down, because they are trying to prosecute those people who have sold the drugs to the person that was overdosed. It's very difficult to figure out where they got the drugs that caused their death. But I'm telling you, these fentanyl, these drugs are just, making our kids, our young people, slaves to other people. So if
So
I had a
yeah,
magic
so
wand, I'd
I've got the magic wand, and you
I
want to get rid of all the drugs. Sounds like you want to get rid of all the apps, and you want to save the world, which is what we're all trying to do.
yes, and we would run through fields of flowers and
A perfect world. Unfortunately,
yeah,
it's not.
not
And now I had a real I had a real serious question, and
okay.
I forgot. Tell me, before I forget, what happens to the traffickers? So we've been focused on trying to get people into the programs and keeping them in and getting them out of this situation. What happens to the person that actually got them involved in this?
Well, so I will say that the district attorney's office in Davidson County has devoted a prosecutor, Sarah Wilson Butler, who I bet is on this Zoom call here. And she prosecutes human trafficking, traffickers. That is her job. And I'm pleased to announce that Chief Drake has taken this problem seriously, and he, through Inspector Harmon Hunsicker, have started 2 units of detectives to investigate human trafficking. And then obviously the TBI is at the forefront of human trafficking all over the state. And then we have the U.S. Attorney's Office, who has a prosecutor devoted to human trafficking. Believe it's Sarah Beth Myers. I don't know if she has any other U.S. attorneys helping her, but they have a unit basically that are prosecuting human traffickers. And I know the department, which I didn't know this, but the Department of Homeland Security, TBI, FBI, all those law enforcement agencies look into it. So there is a lot going on. But if you think about it, Jim, if you're going to prosecute a human trafficker, in order to get evidence, you need somebody who is trafficked. And the fear, the confidence that is needed to testify against a trafficker. And we haven't even talked about trafficking through gang members. There's a whole nother business model through gangs. The fear that these people face and the danger that they face to testify against a trafficker makes it very difficult for human trafficking prosecution. It happens, and there are success stories, but for instance, if a person charged with prostitution is asked to flip and testify against their trafficker, it's easier just to take that B misdemeanor and be done than, go through all that, a jury trial, harassment, all the things that can happen just to get a prostitution charge dismissed. So prosecutors and law enforcement really are kind of at a disadvantage in that it's just hard to prosecute those cases, but it's happening.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, so you've got people you're trying to get come into your program, and and it's a pretty hefty commitment. It's a 2-year commitment, and they're terrified. They've got all these different things that are in their background, but they've got this individual or individuals that have been, they're traffickers who have beaten them, taken care of them, beaten them, whatever this cycle is. So what I'm trying to do is figure out, is there a connection between people who are willing to come into the program because they know the individual who pushed them into this is behind bars or is going to be taken off the streets? Is there a connection between the programs, or at this point there's just not? You just have to hope that somebody has had enough and they're willing to take the risk because they want to get their life back.
Unfortunately, during my time in the program, I have seen that when some of these participants are in our program, traffickers have actually shown up to court and are kind of monitoring what is happening. And so our court is actually all female. And so we prefer that men not attend. So if a man shows up at our court, there's like red flags. So there is still sometimes a connection still with that trafficker. And so through the program, it is our hope that they will break those, what they call trauma bonds. So unfortunately, I cannot tell you that there is a correlation between prosecuting the trafficker and then the survivor is able to then continue with their life. I unfortunately believe that it takes something happens for them to just be done, like they've had enough. And it's very common, for instance, in domestic violence, they say it takes 7 times for a victim of domestic violence to leave their abuser. And, so having done work in that world, sometimes what it is that is the last straw is something you would never expect. But so it takes about 7 times. And we just never can predict. And that's the frustrating yet hopeful thing about it, is that there's no formula. There's no pattern. It's frustrating, but then there's also always hope. And that's the one thing I want to tell you, Jim, that all our participants, whether they fail, run, stay, graduate, they all have hope. And that is just beautiful to see. It really is. So as long as these participants have hope, I
Yeah.
think we can do some good.
All right. So we have a little less than 10 minutes. I'd like to focus on, again, what individuals can do. So one of the questions I thought was that came through was the reporting, again, the mechanism of reporting. You've talked about the red flags, but when you make the call, I mean, you see a situation, what are you reporting? I see a situation that makes me feel uncomfortable. It's a man with a young lady. She's got tattoos, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She looks a little spaced out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm calling this hotline,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know where they're from. I don't know where they live. What's the best thing for an individual to do to at least make an effort in this case?
Well, like I said before, the worst thing you could do is put yourself in the situation and be the hero, because you really don't know what the dynamics are. But for instance, an older man and a younger woman, that's not that there's anything wrong with that, but like among all the other signs, and that catches your eye. So I think the big thing is to call the hotline with as much detail as possible, descriptions of the people, license plate numbers, um, you know, what businesses you saw them in, just as much detail as possible without them noticing that you're noticing. And the important thing, because you never know if your intervening will cause that person to get punished later on. So I would say gather as much facts as you safely can, and then call that hotline, and it'll get to the proper law enforcement agency.
And then what happens at that point? Do you know? I mean, do they then go?
Then it goes, like, it's 1-800 number basically. So it goes to the right agency. And then, like I said, in Nashville, we are so fortunate that Chief Drake is taking this seriously. One of those detectives will follow up and try to figure out what evidence they can go on, interview witnesses, whatever it is. But if nothing else, if it's not a successful intervention, at least you're providing the law enforcement with more background, because so much of this is intelligence gathering, and their databases, it is quite overwhelming. But as the average citizen, like I said, is just pay attention. We need to pay attention to the people that we're encountering, and notice body language, notice the dynamics between people, and like I said, that gut reaction. If you see something, say something.
Can the call be made anonymously?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So people can if they are uncomfortable, they can still make the call and
Yes.
just let people know.
Mhm.
Okay. So okay. So in the last 5 minutes of this call, I think I want to go back to the magic wand. I want to try to figure out, particularly for parents of kids who are trying to protect their children and not to terrify them. And then with the apps out there, because you know this better than obviously I do, but what's the it seems that the numbers get worse. What steps should we take to try to stop this at the beginning? Because it's so much, obviously, if we can stop at the beginning, we don't have to have people go through this horrible stuff.
Right.
What would you tell parents? What would you tell teachers? What's the best thing to do? Obviously, we want to catch these things early. We don't want them to start at all. But what should we be looking at to try to deal with this problem?
So, magic wand. I think that we really need to educate our kids. I mean, I think a lot of us parents want to keep our children innocent and happy and not afraid of the world, but we really, I believe, need to educate them on what is out there. Um, and this goes back to domestic violence as well, is to talk about what is a healthy relationship. And so you really should be in tune with your children's relationships with, same-sex relationships, i.e. friendships, um, friendships, love interests, be really in tune with those relationships, because we as parents really do need to educate our kids about healthy relationships. As I always say in domestic violence court, it's everybody's going to fight. Everybody's going to disagree. It's a myth to think that everybody's going to live happily ever after. And I think that happily ever after from Disney is the biggest disservice to girls ever, but that's a whole nother topic. Um, but you have to learn how to fight fairly, right? And you have to learn how to treat other people with respect, and to get your point across without demeaning somebody. So in a perfect world, we as parents need to be in tune to all their relationships. Like I said, friendships, love interests, parental, familial relationships, that those are all healthy, and monitoring, who it is that they're speaking with and what kind of garbage or what nonsense they're filling your kids with, um, and making sure, of course, as a parent, you telling your parent, oh, I'm sorry, you telling your child that they're beautiful and they're special and that they're smart. The kid, once they turn 13, 14, don't understand that or don't want to believe you. They need to hear it from their peers. So I think we just all need to be in tune about who they're hanging out with, who's kind of giving them information out there. Um, and obviously, there are so many children that are born in families that are not healthy and safe places. So those interventions are so important early on.
We're so as parents, as as friends of parents who have children, of teachers,
Mhm.
people along the line, encouragement, watching carefully, stepping in when necessary. Um, those are things that we can all do, I, I would guess. And you're trying to, if you see a situation developing, you step in early. And
That,
you,
yeah.
yeah, okay. If we want to, if people on this call, people watching later want to volunteer, can they, what's the best way to volunteer to get involved in this, to be helpful?
Well, there's two ways you can volunteer. We do have a foundation that really helps us supplement what the grant doesn't cover. If you'd like and it's got a really catchy name here, Jim. It's called the Human Trafficking Survivors Court Foundation. And
That's
but I'm very
different.
proud of it. I'm
Never
very
thought
proud.
that.
It's very descriptive.
So
But
say it again, because it's a very long name. Human Trafficking
Survivors Court Foundation.
Survivors Court Foundation. Okay,
Uh,
got it. Okay.
yes, and that if support of that foundation would really help us help survivors get their driver's license, get them transportation to their treatment, any therapies that might be extra that aren't covered under the grant, um, clothes, et cetera, et cetera. So if you would like to email me at ANALESCOBAR at JISNashville.gov. I'm happy to provide the link for the foundation. Now, there's a wonderful business called Lady Crew that's on Instagram, and they sell products that support, and the profits from those products support my particular endeavor and also other human trafficking nonprofits. And they sell T-shirts, candles, blankets. It's really nice stuff. There's also an organization called Nashville that was one of the co-founders is Alan Jackson's daughter. She's amazing. She's an amazing young woman. And her products also support human trafficking survivors. And then of course there's, the Sexual Assault Center, Magdalene, go out and buy some Thistle Farm products, be a Thistle farmer, and then end slavery. So there's just, the great thing, Jim, about my having to run for office and getting to know the public is that you realize, and I'm sure you've seen this, there are a lot of Nashvillians doing a lot of good things. And there are a lot of unsung heroes quietly working, making our community better. So there's just so many ways to support what we're all doing. And Nashville, we should be proud. In Nashville, we're really trying. We really are doing a good job.
Well, thanks to efforts like you, Your Honor, and the efforts and people caring about other people. I know we have lots of issues and lots of problems, but we have people trying to make the world better. And so we're fortunate that you're where you are, and that you continue to do good work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a guest on the show. Thanks everybody for listening. Tell your mom I love the painting.
I will. She will die. She will.
Tell her I love the painting. Tell your cat particularly that I enjoyed
her singing.
her participation in the program. Next week we have Amy Bryant, who is the Director of Office of Conservatorship Management, who will be on the call. Everybody, I'll end this by saying, I know whoever's watching, but make sure that you take care of yourself, you take care of everybody else, as many people as you can. Encourage people to get vaccinated. I know we're hitting that time where those numbers are going up. The numbers of people who are getting vaccinated are going down. We're still in a pandemic. We have to take steps to get everybody as safe as possible. So I would encourage everybody to reach out to other people and be of help. Everybody be safe this week. Have a nice rest of the weekend. Hopefully it won't rain the whole weekend. Hopefully the sun will come out a little bit. Enjoy the weekend, and everybody be safe. Judge, again, thank you very much. All right.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everybody.
Bye.